Got a great panel tonight. Welcome, everybody. My name is Lori Hamill, and we're just so excited to be able to have some insights on post-production. I see a lot of familiar faces. Have any of you back there, have you been here to any of the other panels before this? Fantastic. Okay, and you know, as Melissa said, you can watch them at home. So I'd also like to say hello to everybody at home, and I'm glad you're watching. Okay, so let's get started. We have got an esteemed group of panelists tonight, and they're going to fill us in on what they do in film production and help us to navigate the waters of post-production. So let's get started. If you please introduce yourself and let us know what you do. Simon, you want to start?
My name's Simon Taufique. I'm a producer and a composer. I began as a composer, so I was immersed in the post-production world. And before that, I ran a startup, so I was in the business side of things. So when I got into music and then film, all of the business stuff came crashing down on me, and I started to help out on the production side. And in particular, I would bring in a lot of the post stuff that I was learning and being exposed to. So that's what I do.
Wonderful. Mridu?
So my name is Mridu Chandra. I'm a creative producer of feature-length documentaries and also fiction films. I am usually involved in projects from their inception to story development to development and fundraising, through production, post-production, and also distribution. And I've worked on films with budgets from $10,000 to $30 million. And last summer, I worked on a film that was a short film, fiction film, that several people are here today. Rob was our editor.
Coincidentally.
And also our AD is in the audience, so they're gonna keep me in line. But I hope to draw from that experience that I talked today, as well as my my feature-length experience.
Thank you. Rob?
My name is Rob Wilson. I'm an editor. Editor of all types of things. You name it, I've probably cut it. I just sort of came up. I never really worked in production or anything like that. I have had shorts and features and all kinds of things featured in different festivals and aired on television. And most recently, the last short I cut was a Vimeo staff pick, and I had a Vimeo premiere there, and I had a short at the New York the TV festival, and it's have gun will travel.
Wonderful. Raj?
My name is Raj Trivedi. I'm currently a post-production supervisor on a feature-length documentary about a lonely whale. Before that, I line produced a small, very low-budget feature over the summer. Did some teaching. I'm a recent graduate in the Columbia University MFA program. So I've mainly worked in short form besides my writing. I've written features, but I haven't directed my own yet. But I don't know. I think I'm in awe of all these truly esteemed people.
Well, you're on the panel for a reason, and we're really glad to have you here. Is that mic loud enough?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Can you hear all right?
Also very soft-spoken.
Yeah, okay. Well, we all want to hear what you have to say, and we're all really glad that you're here. Thank you for joining us. So I thought an interesting way to start might be to ask, what was a major obstacle that you came up against with a project, and how did you overcome it? Because I know there are a lot of ways to stop when you're an artist, a lot of ways to stop along the way. So I would love to hear what you did when you came up against an obstacle in order to overcome it. You want to start, Simon?
Sure. So my last feature was, my last feature that I produced was a film called Imperium with Daniel Radcliffe. Lionsgate picked it up, and we ended up in post where we went over budget. And so, like most projects, you have more that you need to do, and you don't have enough money to do it. So how do we get to the deadline? And when you have a distributor, there's a very hard deadline. So you've got to somehow figure out where to get to. So what we needed to do was save money. And so one solution was instead of renting editing space, we moved into the editor's home. So we edited out of her space. We did not rent an editing system. I come from a computer background, so I built her editing system. So that saved us some money. And then after the film was done, we sold the computer on eBay. So we were able to reclaim some of that money. And then with our post partner, I was able to convince the owner of the company to become an investor in the film. So some of the money that we needed to claim, they were able to see that as an investment in the film because it had that kind of cast, it had that kind of subject matter. And they weren't really convinced of it. They knew what the film was, but he hadn't seen it. So I dragged him into one of the screenings and said, no, just please sit in, and we have some press people that are coming, so this is going to really be worth your while. And he was blown away when he saw the film, the finished film at that point. Up until then, he knew it only as pieces. So even though you're in post and you're managing a project, you still have to evangelize people to get involved in the project. Now, this was a big film, so it seems like it's very easy to get people on board. The film I did right after that was a short film with very little money as well. And through connections, really just friends who believed in what we were doing, we were able to get another post company to just read the script. They loved it, and they donated a considerable amount of the services. And we thought we were only going to get like a lunch break with their colorist. We got days of free coloring for this film simply because they loved the project. They loved the story and our approach to it, but we had to evangelize them. We had to bring them on early enough so that it wasn't a last-minute thing. Can you rush? Can you get us in during your busy period? We tried to strategize when they're going to be quiet, when they have time to read our project, and over time, all those pieces fell into place. So it was knowing what our limitations were and trying to jump at that in advance.
Oh, that's terrific. And I would imagine that's really reflective also of the entire process of creating a short film, the people that you're going to have to inspire to help you along the way. And I just love what you had. I love this idea of evangelizing. Is that what you said for?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you're saying hallelujah to my project. Please come in. Please help us make this happen.
If you're not excited about it, no one else will be. It's your baby, whether you're the director, the producer, or even a composer. That's how I got into producing, was I was evangelizing, bringing investors or bringing other partners to a film simply because my music was in it, but it didn't matter. I had a creative input into the film, and I believed in it, and I wanted people to see it. People, it's an infection that people will, it's contagious. They will see how excited you are, they will believe in your confidence, and they will want to help. And they'll see this as a winner, and people only back winners. And they back winners based on your personality and your approach to it. They're not. It's easy to say that I backed a winner after it's won the prize. So you want to have people believe that you and your project are worthy of those kinds of prizes.
Wonderful. That's so fabulous. Mridu, would you like to talk about that?
Sure. I think by the time you're in post, the obstacles are like in a different realm because you would have ideally cleared your story rights. You would have finished your production. Maybe you went over a little, which leaves less for post. So there's less money. But there was a really particular story I wanted to tell about music and music licensing. So I produced a film called, had many titles, but I think the final title is The Dissection of Thanksgiving. It premiered at the AFI Film Festival in 2010 and went to many festivals. It was like closing night film in Florida Film Festival, I think, or definitely one. Just love that film. It's a dark comedy. It was written by two actors who met in improv class at UCB, and it's set over the weekend of Thanksgiving. And when we were filming, we shot it up in Buffalo. When we were filming, you are thinking about all the rights that you're using. And our main character is a late night DJ who's unsuccessful and still lives at home with his parents who are now divorcing after 30 years over Thanksgiving holiday. So it's their last Thanksgiving together as a family. And so he's a late night DJ, and I noticed, I was the main producer, and I noticed that they're playing all this like music, like Tears for Fears. And I was like, excuse me, well, what are we going to do about that? And what are we, and he's like, don't worry about it. We'll just clear it later. And I was like, no, we can't do that. And he's like, so, there was this, my producing partner who was one of the writers and the actor. It's like his dream to make this movie. And I just was like, it was, his energy was so infectious. He says, it's fine, we'll be fine. So I was like, at least don't have the music playing in the footage. We can fight this out later. So we don't have, that was like really key, so you don't have to clear the music. I don't mind if they hear it in their headphones, but it's not on our tape. And then we were in post, and I did clear all the music, but the story doesn't end there. So I cleared all this music. It was set in the late 80s, so we got Tears for Fears, we got Billy Idol, we got Supertramp, all these things through time. Time is always on your side when you have no budget, because you just keep asking and you can't really raise your price. And even with Billy Idol, I had to send my director and my producing partner, I was like, you have to go meet his manager in LA. Like, we're not gonna get it if you really want that song. So I set this up, and they went and they convinced him, they showed him the film. Then he finally said yes. So we cleared all the songs, but we cleared it for festival use only. And that's all we could afford. But I also locked in rates, because sometimes you clear for festival use only. We can talk about music licensing later, but that's not part of the story. And so we cleared for festivals, and I locked in rates to clear for all rights later. So I knew what it would cost me. And I also had it signed, so they couldn't later say, oh, your film is so good, or famous, let's say, it's definitely good, and that's making all this money, so we're gonna charge you a lot of money. So we had a rate that we couldn't raise later, because it was still Supertramp and Billy Idol and Tears for Fears. And so we were really stuck, and we actually did get an all-in deal offer from IFC Films, which we couldn't deliver to. So it broke all of our hearts. And I also never said, I told you so, because it broke my heart too. And so we sat with this film for several years. I went to all those festivals, but it didn't go beyond festivals. And our deal sat there. And every year we would talk about what can we do to get this film out there. Meanwhile, our director's using it as his reel, and he's now like directing this huge Sony film that's being shot next month. So it's serving as our reel, but not in public. And our dream is just to get it out there. So 2 years ago, we changed all the music. And we finally felt the creative pull to, or just that it would be okay, the film would be better. And actually it is better. We found contemporary bands who kind of sound like the 80s, and we convinced them all to give us a song. It was a lot of work and energy, but we went back to the Post House, we made the new film. We went back to all those distributors, but we'd kind of lost our chance because of timing, not because you can't sell a film from the 80s again, because that's how hard the industry is. But we released it ourselves. So 2 Thanksgivings ago, we released the film ourselves, and it's out there for you all to see and the world to see forever, and we still own the film. So it's like a little bit of a bitter,
Could you say the name again of the
bittersweet
film
story.
so we can find
Sure,
it?
it's called The Dissection of Thanksgiving.
Okay, and where would people find it?
iTunes, Amazon,
Okay, great.
VOD, but iTunes would be a great place to go.
And what I really hear in that story is tenacity. I mean, just wow, and seeing obstacles, flagging the obstacles, telling people on your team there's going to be obstacles, running into them, and continuing to create solutions, creative solutions. So that's very powerful. Thank
You
you.
never want to we learn from our own lessons, but we also, you can learn from that it should everything you work with, you can't just clear it later. You have to have a plan, and you have to be willing to change your creative ideas, because a film with 80s music is very different than a film that sounds like 80s music, right? But I don't think you'll know the backstory, but when you see the film, it's a complete film, because that's the world that we created in that movie.
That's wonderful.
Can I
Simon?
offer just a
Yeah.
quick tip if you want to use music in your production when you're shooting, and you know from this example that you can't necessarily guarantee that you can clear the music, one way around that is to shoot not necessarily with the music, but just with the beat, but tuned to a frequency that you can very easily tune out in post. So this way you can still have the rhythm of that music in your scene, and let's say you can't clear it, you can find other music that can match to that beat. So you still have the vibe of the music, but it's much easier to replace, so you don't lose the creative vibe that you may have gotten from that piece, because it has a tempo, it has a rhythm that your actors might be flowing with. So one of these tricks is to use just the subharmonics of the music. Again, it's not competing with the dialogue frequency. So in the audio post part, it's very easy to just filter that frequency out, and it won't affect your dialogue. So that's one way around, and that's how a lot of films will use. If there's a dance scene and you've got actors who are dancing in a moment, they're not using the music in the scene, they're just using that subharmonic beat.
That's great. Thank you very much, Simon. Rob?
Yeah, I was I mean, I was going to tell. I am going to tell a different story, but just to piggyback on what you're saying, the distribution is not necessarily my forte. But I cut a feature called The American Side, and they were struggling to find the right festival. We had premiered at Woodstock, but we were struggling to find a distributor, and we were trying to hunt down. And so what the director and co-writer producer wanted to do is they eventually just kickstarted a roadshow tour, and personally went around to different cities, contacted the press themselves, made sure that they could go for one night into one theater and program and basically generated their own buzz with their own, feet, and eventually didn't. You can find it and now on iTunes and Netflix and everything like so. Yeah, but what I was going to say was a different type of problem solving, which is creative problem solving in the edit. You come back from production, and especially when you're talking about short films, you're talking about limited budgets, you're talking about limited time, limited crew, something goes wrong, and there aren't a lot of opportunities to go back and fix anything. So, I mean, it's on the one hand, I'd say, my whole life is problem solving. You know what I mean? They say, fix it in post is not just a clever turn of phrase. It's what we're trying to do every day. And so you can, I'm trying to think of some specific examples. So like one, I had an actor friend who had written a short that took place on a tennis court, and he had shot a dead-on two-shot and coverage from one side, and then the rain came out and they lost everything. So they didn't have a reverse. But what I was able to do just by sort of studying it and playing with the frame a little bit. This is where digital cameras come in, and we can talk more about this. But because there was the resolution and the footage, there was this. He had shot it in a way where what I really needed was, I didn't need every cutaway. I didn't need the whole conversation from the other side. I just needed a look from the other character on the reverse. So I found a moment where the character turns his head in the exact opposite direction that I needed, and I flopped the shot. And I was able to, the scene probably has 3 cuts in it, but I was able to cut between the 2 takes from the side angle by making it look like I had a reverse expression. And so these are just these little digital tricks that you do. I mean, every editor has their own go-tos, but part of my life, part of what I think makes me marketable as an editor is staying up with the technology, understanding what different effects are at your disposal, coming up with different little storytelling tools in the machine that you can use to, fix problems isn't the word, but just to manipulate the image digitally and come up with some solutions. But I mean, I'm going to think of 100 other examples of that, but that was just, that's just a small one of never giving up on your footage just because you don't have all the coverage.
So first of all, let's just get some of the terminology and find out who we might need in that group of people that are going to help us get the film made from the point of it's shot now and now we're handing it over? Would someone like to cover maybe some the workflow of that?
I'll jump in and I'll break it down into the two main components, which is you've got video or story or picture and audio or sound. So those are the two elements that you are now going to craft into your finished film. So your picture is typically going to be cut by or edited by an editor. And ideally, you're working with a professional editor. And I say that because even though you're on a limited budget or no budget, part of the experience here isn't just to finish a film, it's also to have this learning experience so that you can go on to become a better filmmaker, you can make more films. You can have an experience where you can whittle your film down, and by luck and pluck, you can make a really good film at the end and not really have learned how to do it again because you've lucked into certain things and your instincts have kicked in. But if you had to do it again, or let's say a distributor or a festival says, we really love this, but you need to make some changes, and then you have to go back in, you might not know how to do that. I always approach a project where I'm surrounding myself with people who are going to teach me something just by me being around them. And yes, you can't pay some of these people, but you want to offer them something that is going to be rewarding to them. They get to work on a project that they might not otherwise have exposure to. Whatever it is, creative rewards really go a long way. So that's your picture part is your editor typically. And then other parts of the picture process are your color correction or your DI or digital intermediary. And then there's a finishing part of that as well. But those are the two main components of your picture. And then your sound is broken up into sound editing, which is typically cleaning up your background sounds and your dialogue, sound editing, sound mixing, and sound design. Sound design is creating elements in your sound that's not exactly music, it's not exactly non-music, it's non-pitched sound, and it's providing atmosphere, it's providing a texture to your film. And then your dialogue and your sound design, and then if you are going to have music, those elements, the music can be provided by licensed music or a composer who might compose original music for your film. And then those elements are mixed together by a sound mixer, a film mixer, sorry, and during the mixing process. And then they are combining the audio, the final audio, with your final picture. So those are the main components that I've been exposed to. There are other people that can participate in that process, post-production supervisor like Raj, who are overseeing the process, helping you manage it. There's visual effects that can also be part of the process. That's a picture element. But those are extras that are great to have, but they're not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to have them if you're on a super limited budget.
And Simon, can you give us an idea where we might find out more about these elements, resources that we might be able to look into that are either free or very low cost, just to be able to familiarize ourselves with this?
There are a number of online communities of post professionals. There's Two Cows. There's I'm trying to remember another. Creative Cows. Sorry, and I'm trying to think.
Could you repeat that, please?
Creative Cows.
Creative
Or
Cows.
Creative Cow, yeah, is a forum for basically every flavor of post-production problem that anyone's ever run into. Yeah.
And also the forums that are surrounding your editing system. So if you're in Final Cut, if you're in Premiere, if you're in Avid, there are a lot of elementary questions and a lot of advanced questions, and you can learn from both. But those communities are super helpful, and they're populated by some incredibly experienced editors and picture folks. And as a composer, I've gone onto other forums, and Hans Zimmer is writing in, and you'd be amazed at how helpful some of the most amazing and accomplished people can be online.
Yeah. There was just one more group I'd like to add also, is that group called Post Chat, which is a Facebook group, but it's a public Facebook group. It's mainly populated by editors and other post-production technology professionals that it's called post chat.
And is that a closed or open?
No,
group?
it's an open one.
Okay, where do we
So
get that?
so it's public. You can go and post yourself, or you can contact the moderators and ask somebody to reach out on your behalf. But every editor worth their salt that I know of is at least keeping one eye on some of these forums, because they, there aren't, sometimes it's job postings, but other times it's, hey, I'm having this problem. How can I fix it? And I know the answer. We're all trying to make each other better and learn something. And so that these online communities are great for that. Just speaking as somebody who contributes. Yeah. Sorry.
I think what Simon said about creative rewards is a great segue to what I wanted to talk about, which is, you should always keep your eye on the prize and also on the future, in terms of, are you making this film and are you trying to learn every aspect, or are you making this film for, and then you want to direct, or so you may not be good at everything in every stage of the production, but to recognize what you do want to learn and what you can't or don't want to or don't have time to, and then to find those people that can fill in that role for you. And Creative Rewards is a great way to say, find people who have a similar vision, either whether it's the story that's in your film, if it has a specific theme or identity basis, or if that person is growing in their role, like maybe they're an assistant editor and they have cut or they've been helped, an editor recommended them, but they haven't ever had a chance to get an editing credit. So that person, and it takes time to find these people. You can't just find them in one day. It's part of your growth process. Like, for example, when we did this film, The Lady Cave, last summer, short film, Rob served as our editor, and I would love to know why. but he came to us because our director knew him in film school.
No. We had just done Fits and Starts, the feature.
Right.
So yeah,
Okay.
so I had cut. We had met when she was looking for feature. It was at South by Southwest last year,
So all I knew as producer was that we had an editor. It was the director's friend, and she was very confident in him, and I was like, fine. And part of that, it was, I looked him up and stuff, but part of that is because I'm also going to trust the team and the creative team that my director wants, and she'd worked with him, and there are many factors. We also didn't have a lot of money, but most important is the creative factor, is you find that team person and then you just trust them. And if they don't, Rob has a lot of experience, so I didn't have to worry about that. But let's say he didn't, I wouldn't then be like, oh, you don't know this, I have to learn it. I would provide the opportunity for him to learn it, because that's his field and he's gonna move forward as an editor. I don't need to move forward as an editor. I just need to know the language that I'm working in as a producer to work with post people, but to provide that opportunity for him to grow, although he didn't need it. Well, he's just serving as my example.
Every opportunity is a good opportunity. I had a mentor tell me once. He just said, "Say yes to everything. Don't turn down a single job unless extenuating circumstances. But don't give up on a project because there isn't enough money or whatever. I know we're not here for my own philosophy about why I take jobs, but I say it's people project or pay, and you want to. And so what I would communicate to
one or two of the three.
You want to. And I say that's not that you can make a decision based on
people,
one of them.
Pay,
people
and
pay or project, and project being, what is the story you're trying to tell? What is this? What is the script? Or who are the people that you're working with? And I have done projects for literally no money, where I meet the person. I say, I read the script, I like it. I meet the producers, the directors. I say, these people are going places. I would like to work with them. And we literally have $0, and I was like, what? Screw it, I'll do it. Or we're working on something, and there are any number of reasons why you'd say yes to something. But I would say is that the right philosophy and the philosophy that you want of the people is that, look, if you got into editing for the money, you got into it for the wrong reasons. You're not. There's not no one is necessarily going to buy a mansion in the Hamptons off their editing salary. So, what you what I would trust if you believe in your vision. Goes back to evangelizing. If you believe in your project and you believe you have something to say and you have good people to say it with, I would go forth with that philosophy and find the people to join your team who believe in that philosophy as well.
And just to jump in, I think all of these examples talk to the fact that this is a work and a business based on not just talent, but even more so on relationships. And valuable relationships take time. So the time that you want to plan for your post-production process is when you're planning your pre-production process. So if you want to get people that you really believe in and that you're a fan of, you have to go to them early. And they may not be convinced early because they may not know you well enough, or they may not know your project well enough, and you may have to let it simmer with them for a little bit. And so by the time you get into production, you're still checking in with them, or they're not available, or all of these things take time. And especially if you are offering them less than they usually get, or if you are challenging them with your material, maybe it's controversial, maybe it's a new stylistic challenge. Whatever the case is, you want to give an adequate time for this process that as actors, you have been purposely excluded from post-production. Most actors are not allowed in the editing room for a reason. They're not allowed.
For a reason.
So this
Tell us the reason.
No, sorry.
Because the film will be all about you and not about the story. So there have been famous actors now, who have shown up at the premieres of films that they were in and were inadvertently not told that they were left out of the film. And their families were brought in and all this stuff. And then they see the end credits and not only were they not in the film, they're not in the credits either. And people forgot to tell them. And it is a very fluid process, so it does happen. But because that happens, because actors and a lot of the creatives are left out of that finishing process, this is all new to us as creatives, as composers. I've scored films where my favorite piece of music didn't end up in the film, and you just have to expect that's part of it. Maybe it wasn't going to help the story, but again, getting to my original point, which is you've got to start early and you've got to develop these relationships. And it's not only when you are asking for something, it's when you're going to networking things, when you're going to parties and finding people who you relate to, who you want to work with, regardless of what they're doing in the post process. If you like the way they see story, the way they work, what their outlook is, you will like working with them. They will see something in you that they want to work with, and will forego things like schedule or money or things like that.
Can I jump in on this real quick? I completely agree with everything you guys have said. And I'd also like to posit an alternative. Because I'm sure like a lot of you guys just want to go out there and $20 in your pocket, make something, be in it, tell your own story, cut it, and you'd rather spend your time doing that and maybe don't have the budget or the time to find an editor. There's tons of great resources. Like they said, Creative Cow, there's lynda.com, all these tutorials online now that you can learn the basics of editing. You can get Premiere Pro or Avid on your computer for like $30 a month, $50 a month, And if you just want to make your short, get your hands dirty and figure out why you're not welcome in the edit room, maybe this is a good way to do it, Seriously though, like get your hands dirty, get in there, try to edit your own movie. And you may realize, like, you know what? I love acting and I also like editing. Turns out I'm good at it. Or you can end up being like, you know what? I hate this. I spent $50 this month on the software, over it. Now I'll go look for someone. It's worth doing, I think. There's also tons of great books. Like there's this like 90-page book by terrific editor Walter Murch called In the Blink of an Eye, which tells you so much more.
Buy that book.
Buy that book. It's like $4, and it's totally worth used. But it's totally worth it.
Maybe at the Strand.
Yeah, exactly, used. But Walter Murch.
Editor of I mean, 100 Coppola movies, and
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
legendary editor.
and I hope you don't have to agree with me, but I think you might, that at the end of the day, you'll realize, like, yeah, your basic instinct initially might just be like, I just want to make these cuts. And you'll figure out soon through these resources why, like, what exactly storytelling through editing is. And that's a whole different beast than just, cutting from person saying a line to the next person saying the line to the wide. Like, that's boring. You don't want to cut basic coverage. And sometimes, at least for me, like, I have to do things before I realize why I shouldn't. And if that's the only reason why, then I think you should get your hands dirty. Get one of these softwares on your computer. When you shoot your movie, edit it yourself for the first assembly or even rough cut, or even try to finish it by yourself. I don't know. I think it might be worth it at this stage.
Well,
Well, I was just gonna, while we were just on the subject of software, to list off really quickly that on top of more just the not even just the subscription fees, but Avid has a 30-day free trial that you can download. And so if you just want to hack away at something for a couple weeks and you got some time to kill, you can download Avid. Adobe Premiere 30-day free trial. You can start both of these. DaVinci Resolve, which is typically known as a color correction software, but has recently started branching out into fleshing out their editing tools in the platform, is free. You can download it and it'll run on your Mac or your PC, I think. PC. And it's, there is a quality available software out there inexpensively, or for free, depending on your schedule. And then beyond that, it's, monthly subscription. A lot of these places are monthly subscriptions now. Sorry, yeah.
I just wanted to say, totally agree with all of that. If you were to be looking for those creatives to work with, you also don't necessarily have to create an entire post-production team that's fully funded, big film kind of style. The minimum of what you would need would be, like Simon was breaking it down to picture and audio. Find one person to manage picture, one person to manage audio, and maybe the picture person is your editor who can also do color correct. There are a lot of editors now who have setups in their house, or they work at a post house, or they have access to a post house because they take projects with money there. So if your editor can carry picture to the end, which is editing and then color correcting, when they get the sound, they marry it back, they color correct, then they make all your exports. That's what you want the video side to go.
And would you just explain that just a little bit more for us about the exports, about what you need for that, what that means?
Sure. Can we come back to that?
Absolutely.
And then the audio goes to a separate house with that one person who could be maybe a sound editor, and that person could find someone for you to do the cleanup, audio cleanup and sound design. He would do or she would do sound design, but they would do the final exports handed over to picture. So you need those two people minimum. So one person to handle all your video needs, all your sound needs through the process, but you would also need to figure out the music. So either that would be a composer or someone, if it's the producer or you, to license music, which you can also do through music libraries that have not just songs with lyrics, but they have tons of amazing tracks that you can license for $100 or less. If you have a very low budget, you can write to sound libraries and tell them your story and your sad story about your production and get them to give you like 5 tracks or whatever. You sort of figure out what you need and what kind of style you want, and then kind of go find that. So there's 3 things you need: is the music, the picture, and the sound.
Great, thank you.
And just to step back to what Mridu talked about earlier, which is trust. All of these, having these people, building this team and working with all of these creatives, it's based on trust. You trust their abilities and their taste. So I like to think of an analogy, which is when I get on a bus or get into a taxi cab, even though I know where I want to go, I'm not going to tell this person every turn and how fast they should go or which stoplight they should brake at. I have to trust that they know what they're doing. They're relying on me to tell them where I want them to take me. And then I need to focus on something else rather than micromanaging that process. Otherwise, it's going to be a hellish journey. and they will never want to take me on a ride again. And so thinking long term, ideally, you have tapped into an amazing creative professional who is going to go on to blossom in their career as well, and you want to work with them again. So you want to tap into what they are providing, and that means trusting their abilities, trusting their taste, and also allowing yourself to focus on the bigger picture of what kind of storyteller am I? What kind of story am I telling? And can I get there with this professional? Can they help me get there? Can I learn something from what they're providing? If you want to focus on doing everything yourself, you can certainly do it, but chances are your story is not going to, it'll be realized in a different way, and in all likelihood, it's gonna be a much more painful experience. You might end up with a better film, but you may never wanna make a film again. As a composer, I routinely meet with directors who've gone through that process, and by the time they get to me, which is typically the last creative element of the filmmaking process, and they're burnt out. A lot of times they're burnt out because they've done everything by themselves. And that journey can take 6 months or it can take 6 years. And by the time they get to me, they have forgotten what kind of story they're trying to tell. They've forgotten why they're telling it. And a big part of my job isn't just writing music for them, it's reminding them why they fell in love with that story. So I go in and I'm trying to excavate, what is this story about? Where did it come from? Where does it need to go? Those are very elemental questions that they started off with, but they've forgotten because they've been so micromanaging the process. The filmmakers that come to me that are the least burnt out are the ones who've been able to trust these other professionals, and they don't have to be quote unquote professionals, they can be people who are starting out as well. But it's not been this process where you're carrying the entire load by yourself. Because yes, you'll get there, but you'll have a broken back by the time you get to the destination.
Were you going to say something, Raj?
I was. No,
I'll jump in real quick and see if what was I going to say? Oh, now I forgot.
Oh, I know.
Okay. Yes,
Thanks.
So
yes, go
Simon,
ahead.
going off of Simon's earlier point about preparing for post in pre, and also all these people whose help you may be enlisting, when you're in production and when you're doing everything, can we talk about like hard drives for half a second and organization?
Yes.
Am
Yeah.
I jumping too far off? Okay.
No, that's great. We'd love to
So-
hear about it.
Yeah, make sure your hard drive is 7,200 RPM.
Okay, would you please repeat that a little bit louder? for everybody?
7,200 RPM hard drives. Lacy Rugged is nice and pretty cheap. Glyph has a nice cheap, maybe not cheap, but it's good. Avoid like your Western Digitals and, avoid cheap. Go with something that's like decently priced, 7,200 RPM, and I'm sure
And multiple copies.
At least
in
two.
different places.
back everything up. And when you are enlisting the help of all these generous friends and creatives that want to help you with your project, when you're on set and, making copies, everything, make sure that like all the cards get organized very, very clearly on your drives. Make sure and have someone that is a good DIT, or at least your most organized friend, have them do it, because you don't want to show up and just have like a hard drive full of video and audio, and like when you hand it to someone after you've begged them to help you for free and maybe a slice of pizza, they'll get it and be like, well, fuck you, I'm off because none of this makes any sense. Half my life's going to be spent, organizing your nonsense. No one wants that, right? I was just going to talk about organizing, then I got
Well,
passionate.
I think
I'm
it's
sorry.
great. Yeah, it's so important, and these are things that how on earth would you have any idea what you want to bring to someone in post when you've never done it before? So these are just such wonderful tips, and we so appreciate the heartache that we're keeping the people in our post-production bays having to deal with. Did you have something to say?
I was just going to mention, so one of the steps in the process that can kind of get lost in translation now, a lot of editing software will sell you on the idea that you can just pull it right out of the camera and stick it right in the application and get to work on it. Now that sounds great, and it may technically be possible, but it depends on what system you're running, and it depends on how old your computer is, and it depends on what you're trying to push through and exactly how you want it to look. Now, the recommendation that I would make is that you probably transcode down. Transcoding would be process the footage down to a slightly more compressed version of your video, so that you aren't trying to push the 5K, 8 billion terabyte file that your camera records through your computer just to like play it back for your friends. I think it's really important that you understand the workflow and I mean, this is I'll just go so far as to say, look into narrative workflows, Google it. Make sure you understand that what is required, and also this is where looping in your editor during production is helpful. Looping in your post sound team during production is helpful, because they're going to tell you what they need in order to do their job right, and bringing on people who will help you understand where you may get tripped up down the line. Because yeah, sure, you may be able to bring the file right in and look at it, and that's great when you're just trying to review dailies, but when you're actually trying to cut with it and add sound effects and music and add color correction to it and visual effects, I mean, you're asking your computer to do a lot, and so the best thing you could do is transcode it down. Yeah.
And just to tap onto what you just mentioned about production sound, bring your sound recordist, your boom op or your sound mixer, bring them to your location scouts. They can isolate a noisy location before you agree that this is the perfect spot, and then that person comes to set and they realize there's an air conditioner unit next door that we're never going to get out of the dialogue. Every dollar you skimp on in production sound, you will have to spend $10 in post-production to fix. So be very careful and mindful about spending your money wisely in production, and sound is critical. Audiences they've been surveyed, 80% of the time people will not tolerate bad audio. It will distract them much more than video issues. So we are much more tolerant about video issues because we might actually think that it's a creative choice. But bad audio, we have a very low tolerance for glitchy or noisy audio. It's much more distracting, and it will cost you much more to fix.
Do you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, if I can just break down the process.
Yes, please
that we're
do.
all talking about.
Yeah.
So in the very beginning, you're looking for hard drives. So the reason 7200, it's not just a number, it has a meaning, and that's about the speed of the hard drive. And anybody who's tried to transfer footage from one hard drive, or from your computer to a hard drive, or from a SD card, nobody wants to sit there for 5 hours. So when you're on set, you're gonna have somebody on set, either your assistant camera, if you have one, or your DIT if you have one, or it'll be your camera person, or it'll be your buddy who you brought on set and teach how to do this. That's called your DIT. And their only job, hopefully their only job, although I often have people do two things. My DIT and AD is sitting here. But you want them to make sure that they can pay attention to what they're doing, and that they're not also running around as a PA and also answering the producer and the director. And their only job is to take that SD card, which comes out of the camera, and download it onto your hard drive, which was the highest speed. So 7200, we're saying that because it's the highest speed right now. So that's the reason that number is important, is the processing speed, which goes into what Rob was saying too with his computer.
Playback, yeah.
But so you have your DIT downloading. It's ideal if you can have them download by date, so that it's date card 1, date card 2, date card 3, so you know how many. You can also tell time when it's downloading, and then you also have them back it up while they're on set. So you have 2, because you can't afford to have any accidents, right? And then the other thing that you said was speed of your computer. Transcoding. So transcoding basically just means translating from what the camera is shooting, and ideally you're shooting in 4K. Although you can't project your film in 4K unless you're in a 4K situation. So you're likely not going to finish in 4K, but don't worry about that, because we always record in the best possible format. And right now cameras are I always want to say right now because all of this information will change. So you just have to learn categories of terms. You don't have to actually memorize anything. But 4K now, you're shooting in the highest resolution, and then you're working with when you hand over this very highly organized hard drive and keep one in your vault as a backup in a separate location, ideally your editor will transcode, but because you know that takes time, you're going to give them time. You're not going to be like, I need this Friday, and they're going to be like, well, you just gave me 30 hours of footage, I have to transcode it. And what transcoding means is you can work with a lower resolution, so you're not working with 4K, which is slowing down your computer. Does that make sense?
And then when it comes time to finish, you go where your colorist comes in, where your colorist can help, or the people who work with your colorist, or you, the editor, will come in and bring those files. We'll relink those files to the master files, and then that's what you're grading with.
And that's called the conform process. So it happens from film. You know, in film, we always have video dailies, and then we go back to film at the very end, so you're cutting on the film, but you have to have video to work with. It's the same idea, but now we're all digital, so we're going from 4K to whatever K.
Well, usually, I mean, I tend to cut in more ProRes LT or DNX36, which is Avid's, just the cheapest. When I say cheapest, the lowest bandwidth, lowest quality version of HD that you can find,
So it still looks good.
So it's still, it's like watchable, but not perfect, because really what you need to judge is the cuts. That's your primary job is there to piece it together, making sure that it looks its most polished. It's not the thing you need to be worrying about first.
But everybody still looks good, actors.
And in terms of backups, just to back up to the backups for a second, what we've liked to do on shorts and features is have for shorts, it's a backup for each day, and then a master backup, which would be a backup of everything. And then on a feature, you would have daily backups and then weekly backup of your entire week. So this way you have two sets of backups. But yeah, in terms of having a master, in terms of having daily backups, if something goes wrong, you can now piece together what you saved, because you're going to be overwriting the cards.
Yeah, I mean, and let me just reiterate it in case it hasn't been mentioned enough times. You need multiple backups. It is unacceptable to only back up to one hard drive, because every hard drive will fail.
And each backup needs to be in a separate location.
Yes.
So if your house burns down, you don't lose everything. You've got your master somewhere else, and so you're thinking about all the worst case scenarios that can and will happen.
Wow. We're getting a lot of great information. Now, just remember, you can go back and watch the video, so you can, slow it down, take each piece here. I love the resources that you're giving us where we could look up, and even the fact of just being able to Google the process about things. Right now, just FYI, if you have questions in the audience, please pass them down the row so that we can get them before we end tonight. I want to continue on the conversation. Now, boy, we could go on for a weekend, couldn't we? Talking about
Should
this.
we get to the finish line?
Yes, let's do it.
so
Also, Rob had something you wanted to say?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Please finish the thought. I had something else to
Well,
mention.
I was just going to talk about what happens after you conform and get to the exports,
Please
which
do.
you asked. But do you have something to say?
No, I did unrelated.
So once you are coming back to the process, when you're conforming the film or your editor is conforming the film, marrying the sound that's been worked on by your sound people.
Mridu, could I just ask, could you
Yes,
move
sorry.
closer, just so we can all hear you? Thank you.
So when you're in the conform process, that's then when you go back to the full resolution, the original quality, what resolution of material, whether it's sound and picture. And you also have to start thinking about what you're going to finish on. So since we're all here to talk about short film, I assume it's going to a film festival. And so you want to make the form of what film festivals screen. And you can look up your goal film festival, and they usually have tech specs, but most of them are the same. So after you look up one or two of them and you feel confident that they're the same, you basically need a DCP to screen it at any film festival, which is a digital cinema package. It's a little hard drive.
Well, that's what we thought. So I've been sold that as well, that DCP was the final
The
delivery.
only way.
Yeah, but for shorts, now we're finding that what the festivals are doing, and I've been on the programming committee for Tribeca Shorts for a while, and it has changed where they're now asking for a hard drive so it's split between bigger festivals are asking for QuickTimes, high-res QuickTimes on a hard drive, and then other festivals are asking for DCPs, but it's not universal. Right. So it's been tricky.
So I guess what I generally do, and this is also thinking about who you're going to work with from the beginning, is ideally you'll make a flat rate deal with the person who's going to handle your picture post. So you kind of need to know what you're asking for from the beginning and what your goals are. So usually I ask for a certain number of exports, which I'll tell you about, and then I ask for a DCP, and I ask for 3, and I'll tell you why. And then I ask for Blu-rays, and then I'm pretty much set. So for the exports, which would be the first thing you create with your editor, you want the film texted, which means with all the graphics that you've put on it, with any kind of chyrons or subtitles if they're speaking in a different language. So the finished film. And you want it in 5.1 with 5.1 sound and stereo sound, right? So you have your full res picture completed with 2 different kinds of audio. And then you also want your film, and I guess there's also the frame rate question, but let's just assume since you're going to festivals, we'll make the DCP format, which is 23:9:8. But let's not get into frame rates. Mm-hmm. So we have our texted film. I also ask for a textless export, and I also ask for a textless, but that is basically texted without subtitles, because I am often working on films that have subtitles. I will get it fully texted, but without subtitles. And with those 3 exports, you basically fulfill all the, but they each have 5.1 and stereo sound stems and mixes, if that makes sense. So you have maybe 6, but they could also all be in just 3, if that makes sense. And then I usually get a DCP, and I'll get 3 because I'll put 1 away in a closet, and the other 2 I'll send to festivals, and that way if festivals are near each other, I don't get stressed about where it is. And festivals will often send it to the next festival for you, so you're really just sending it off in the first time. And so you want to ask for your exports, however many, in whatever parameters you feel you're going to need. I usually get those 3. And then the DCPs, I get 3. This is like I'm just telling you the base minimum. You can always do more. And then I also get Blu-rays, because a lot of festivals and or communities will screen on community screenings and or educational or universities, they'll screen on Blu-ray. And some places will ask for a DCP, but a Blu-ray backup. So even though you've spent all this money for a DCP, they still want the Blu-ray. And Blu-ray has master. So the reason this is important to break down and to think about is because these are hard expenses. These are not people expenses. So you can actually get your editor to work really long hours and at a flat rate, and the hours just keep going up, but you can't actually all of a sudden say, can we also get 20 Blu-rays? Because your post house will say, well, we have to master the Blu-ray, and then how many Blu-rays, because each one has a specific price. And if you didn't negotiate that in the beginning, that you want 100 Blu-rays or you want 20 Blu-rays, et cetera, then you have to pay the fee. Right.
I was just going to say, if my memory serves me, on the project we did together, we were having, there was some internal back and forth with the client about logos and branding at the end. And at a certain point, like, we were sending them revision upon revision upon revision, but we weren't being able to anticipate what they ultimately needed. And that's where the textless version came in. For them, you requested that for me. And you got it, and they were able to like pass along to them to manipulate themselves. So I was just trying to back up.
So there's many reasons for that text list, because then you're freeing your editor from you, which is nice, and you're also preserving it for the future, because maybe the person who's commissioned this film now only has rights for 3 years, but you need to have it textless. So in the future, if someone else comes on board, you can add or replace logos.
Also, you mentioned subtitles, and even English language films are now being asked for subtitles. So my last short film, we got an Amazon deal, and Amazon would not allow the film into their system without subtitles, because they were automatically going to distribute into international markets that require subtitles. So even though your film is in English and you may think, I'm only looking at American festivals or whatever, you may get an offer for Amazon or another online streaming service, and if they're international, they may require it as a default. Even if you may not want to screen in other countries, they may require it so that they don't have to come back to you if those other markets open up. And subtitling is a pain. It's a very difficult process, and you should definitely think about having an intern help you with subtitling, because it's a lot of work.
Intern, another great word to add to this. Incredible amount of work that goes into post. And I really appreciate everyone breaking it down and trying to make it as understandable as possible. I know it's like we're getting into a whole nother world with post-production. I do have some questions from the audience, and I'd like to see how many we could get through at this time. For Mridu, and actually for the group, this is a question: what is the best way to approach rights clearance for post-production? You talked about your persistence.
Sure. So rights clearances can be in many layers. So anything that's, we do product clearance. I'm now trying to shift my mind into fiction film instead of documentary, but so I just focus on that. But basically, you have to make sure everything in the film is cleared, everything visual, like there's no trademarks, there's no other, but you can hire a clearance specialist to do that, or just make sure you don't have too much. I wouldn't worry about that too much, but you do have to make sure everything in the picture is cleared. You also have to make sure that anything third party, anything you didn't create, so that applies to those things in the picture and or sound. So all the music clearances. I think we could have a whole hour on music clearances.
Yeah.
And that music is cleared two ways for the same song. So you clear the publishing and the recording rights, because there are two rights associated with every song. And sometimes, and the rights holders can be broken into like 4 people wrote the song and they have 10%, 30%, 50%. It adds up to 100 with the 4th person. And then, and it goes on both sides. So it's kind of like a specialty. So that's something that it's really helpful to work with people on. But if you're navigating it yourself, it's nice to find like a studio that you can work with, or a music library, or a supervisor who's interested in your story that can help you do that.
And if you're licensing music, just like almost anything else, there are rates, and if you reach out to people and tell them, like, listen, I have this much, can we work something out? Oftentimes they will, They may suggest other songs in their library or other places to go. They'll want to. Right. People can work with any budget. They may not give you the one song you want, but you can always figure that out too. And
yeah.
Like Mridu was saying earlier,
We'll have to rewind the tape.
Okay. It sounds like things are negotiable.
Things
that to
are
keep trying,
negotiable.
to be persistent, and to keep asking people who might know other people what they might recommend as a next step, or someone that they might recommend.
Is there any other clearance I'm forgetting?
No, but one thing that you should be careful of is don't necessarily ask the artist who wrote the music, because they may not own the music. So even though they love you and they love your film and they're honored that you want to use their music in your film, they may not have the ability to license the music to you. So a lot of times, if they're on a label, if they may have already licensed, or they may have a publishing deal, it gets very complicated, and usually the artist is not the person who will know or have the answer for you whether or not you can license it. It's great to have their permission, and they can help you fight your case, but ultimately it's very rare that the artist who's unsigned will have the ability to pull that trigger.
I think I remember. So you were talking earlier about the festival rights, how you guys got music for festival rights. And so that's one way to go about it. You can ask for festival rights, or you can ask for rights in like a step deal, which can often help you out. You say, listen, this is all I can afford right now, but if down the road, the movie makes this much money, then we'll pay you this much more. And then if it makes that much more on top of, let's say like it makes $10, then I'll give you $2 more. If it makes $20, I'll give you $3 on top of that, So you can try to make these kinds of deals that benefit both parties.
And that step deal is different from what I was talking about, which was to clear all territories. So he's saying you would clear all territories, use of the song, so that you don't have to go back, but you're locking in rates according to the success of the film, which is a step deal, which is different from clearing only certain territories like festivals only, which was my sad story.
So this is a question from Mary Jo. Does anyone have experience licensing news footage for use in your film? Anyone?
I do.
Okay.
That's
Mridu?
one of my specialties because my first film was an archival film about a civil rights activist. So I worked on the Steve Jobs film by Danny Boyle, and I cleared all the TV news. There were 3 acts in that film that were divided by transitions made from news footage that was real about Steve Jobs. The answer is yes, but what do we want to talk about? That's also a process of clearance rights. If you use anything that is historical or that, I also consider anything another camera person shot to be archival. It may not be historically archival, but it's third-party material. So you definitely have to get the rights to clear that, and that's another license. That's part of your paperwork.
Here's a question. Would you agree that the comments you made also, this is for everyone on the panel, would you agree that the comments you made also apply to full-length production? The things that you talked about tonight?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. So maybe it's a good way to even just start with filmmaking and using these good practices so that if you have snags along the way, they at least won't be these snags, right? This is from TJ. The challenge is money for production and post-production. Do you have any recommendations on fundraising? Wow, we could have a whole nother panel on this. And I think actually there is a panel on fundraising that you can find on the SAG-AFTRA Foundation channel on YouTube. But would anyone like to just touch very briefly since we're close to the end of time here with our
I've done successful Kickstarter campaigns. I deal with investors regularly. It helps when you have a hook for your film that ties into what the people who you're asking money for are interested in, whether it's a cast member, it's a story idea, it's you. Friends and family is the first stop on any fundraising train. So do they believe in your mission? Do they believe you? That you really want to do this, that you're going to be good at it, that this is important to you, and that you're going to finish, that this isn't just some pipe dream. I mean, all of these things, you may think that, well, my parents are going to be real difficult about it. They're easy compared to all the people who don't love you. So use that as a great test bed for how you need to convince people to believe in your mission, and that this is part of a larger mission. Your story is their story. The story that you're trying to tell should speak to them. Why do they care about whether or not this film exists in the world? So all of those are things that will help you sell your film. And then also, there are a lot of things that don't necessarily need hard cash to help you make your film. There are restaurants and there are other vendors that would benefit your production, and you can benefit them by cross-promoting. So there's a lot of different avenues to save you money.
Totally agree. And I also think, depending on what level you're making it at, don't spend any money. There's almost no reason to, Go get your friends, get your iPhone, practice your shots. If the goal is to feature yourself in a project you care about, in a story you've written, don't spend any money. Go out and just make something with what you have, with the access you have. Everyone has access to New York City in your backyard. You have access to your apartments. Write the stories that fit what you have access to. There's certain things that are going to cost money, like feeding your crew. If you're doing with a group of friends or something like that, then feed them. Those are these hard costs that, you're not going to get away with skimping on feeding your crew. and don't, because they're doing something for you, you know? But like, I made a short for $300. We shot it in a day. Everyone was fed. Everyone was happy. And at the end of the day, like, we walked away with something we loved. And all that did was I could show that project to someone else and be like, here's what we did. Here's a little story. It's 3 minutes long. And they're like, oh, I like that. Here's more money to do something else. So once you do something for free and show people, like, look, I actually have ideas and want to do things, then they're more likely to help you. If on your first project you're like, I need 10 grand, otherwise I can't even make this. No one wants to give you money if you don't show like some sort of, you know, chutzpah for getting out there and just doing it, right?
Wonderful. I want to say that we're at the end of our time tonight with our panel. What I'd love to ask is if you'd let us know how we can reach you. Again, when you're watching this video at home or here in the audience, you can always go back to the invite originally that will give you the bio of each of our wonderful panelists. But I want to make sure that you know how to find them. And if you could just let us know what you're working on right now that you're excited about. Simon?
I'm working on a feature documentary called The Interpreter, and it's about translators in Iraq and Afghanistan who worked with the U.S. forces there and were abandoned as a result of a lot of bureaucratic nonsense that's been going on. And so it's about the unlikely story of the bond that is created between an American soldier and his Iraqi translator, and he tries to get him out. So I'm scoring and producing that right now, and casting and funding a bunch of other projects. I work out of a post-production facility not too far from here. I'll make this offer to all of you here because this is a very complex topic of post-production, and it's made a little more obvious when you see how the work is being done, or you see a facility and where this kind of stuff happens. So I'd like to offer all of you the opportunity to see how this work gets done, and we can coordinate all of that, but I would be happy to give you a tour of what these people do and how they do it.
Fantastic, thank you. So how can we do that?
You can reach me at, well, I've got a Twitter, so it's at Simon Taufique, and you can just reach me on Twitter and or Facebook, Simon Taufique, and yeah, we can coordinate a time and place.
Wonderful. Thank you. Mridu? Okay, yes, and just so you know, also if you go back to the invite that you had for coming here tonight, all the names are spelled out with the bios and also will be on the video. But could you also for tonight, could you please spell your last name for us?
Sure, it's T-A-U-F as in Frank, I-Q-U-E.
Thank you. And tomorrow Melissa will send it, or sometime this week Melissa will send it to you as well, depending how busy it gets here at the foundation. Mridu?
So I'm working on a film. I'm producing a film called The Fat and the Furious, and it's set in senior year of high school with three best friends that are girls, young women, and they turn the tables on this bully tormentor that they've had for years, and then they realize that let's just say it all ends well. And so that's a feature film I'm producing, and I also work full-time at the Tribeca Film Institute, and I run a fund that funds short documentaries, and we hope to, basically our goal is to stimulate the production and distribution, to carve out new distribution for short documentaries. We will eventually hope to expand that into fiction films, but for now, it's called If Then, and it's for short documentaries.
And how would you like people to be able to find you?
So my email address is on my website, so that gives me some reason to ask you to go look at my website, which is just my name.com, so mriduchandra.com.
Thank you. And Rob?
I am currently cut deep in post on a feature that Vice is producing called Goldie. We have a lot of great New York character actors in it, and it's shaping up to be a good little film, slowly but surely. And let's see, if you are looking for me, you can find me at Rob G. Wilson just about everywhere. RobGWilson.com, Rob G. Wilson on Instagram and Twitter and all the other various social media things.
Fantastic. Yeah. Raj?
Like I said, I'm currently working on this environmental documentary called 52, The Search for the Loneliest Whale. And it's about a whale that sings at a different frequency than all other whales in the ocean, which makes it lonely. So our director decided, I need to find this whale because everyone's intrigued by it and need to go find it. So we actually just finished Conform on that recently. Now everyone knows what that is. And we went through the color session today, and we go into sound post-production in a few weeks, and it's all very exciting, and it's a lovely film. Can't wait for everyone to see it. And like I said, I'm working on that other short, the border one, and finishing that, and then just a couple other projects. I have a series I'm developing. We have the pilot out in the world, and trying to get my first feature on the road. So.
And how can we find you, Raj?
RajTrivedi.com, and it has my email, and same with the Twitter. Twitter is RajT @RajT.
All right. Well, thank you so very much to our panelists. Let's give them a big round of applause. Wow, you covered a lot of ground tonight, and we are extremely grateful. Thank you all, and thank you for being here tonight.